All
Hello.
right. Am I on?
You are. How are you?
Excellent. Good. How you doing, Alex?
I'm good, thank you. So, thank you to everyone for tuning in today for this episode of Sustainable Design Chats, where we chat with sustainable designers and entrepreneurs about their products and how they are building a better world. I am your host, Alex Shield, and today we are speaking with Sam Aguirre. Sam is an artist, designer, researcher, and collaborator who has a circular approach to crafting sculptural furniture. He works with commercially available bio-based materials using artisanal processes and techniques. Sam has received numerous awards for his work, and his work has been featured in the New York Times, Dezeen, Sight Unseen, and Dwell, just to name a few. And his products have been in exhibitions all over New York, all over the US actually, and Mexico. So Sam, I am so excited to speak with you today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Can you always introduce me? That was awesome.
Yeah, sure. I will. Anytime you need me to, I'm there. So I'm very excited to chat with you, Sam. I think this is so cool. So essentially you make compostable furniture, and a friend of mine saw you at a show in New York, and she had posted your lamp, actually one of your beautiful lamps, in stories, and I was like, what is this? And that's how sort of I found you and we got in touch. So can you explain to us what this is, like what is compostable furniture, and how you came up with this idea?
Sure. Yeah, compostable furniture is exactly what it sounds like. Just furniture that you can put in the compost bin or send to the compost facility, with clarity in mind, a clear conscience. I think a better explanation of it would be furniture made with natural materials. That's like the simplest way to put it, because natural materials are the things that we can put in the compost bin, and my work mostly deals with natural plant-based fibers.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So can you tell us a little bit about your background? Maybe introduce yourself a bit as well, and sort of how did you get into this? Did you always dream about making compostable furniture or furniture in general?
Yeah, so there's a few stories there. One story is like the journey towards furniture, but I think the more relevant one for your first question is like why compostable furniture? Where did that start? That started with paper mache with my son. So we were making a lot of objects with paper mache, and we wanted to do something, again, for a clear conscience. We just wanted to make the process a little more environmentally aware, because we were doing it a lot. And yeah, we just wanted to be able to throw it away with a clear conscience. And we started working with different recipes, different binders, different starch-based binders, and we found one that really worked with cornstarch.
Okay.
And it ended up being super resilient. Like the objects we were making were still really strong and compostable. So we started playing with that a little more, or I kind of like went on a segue beyond just toys for the toy bin and traditional paper mache. And I kept like, because at this point I was already a furniture nerd, and I kept thinking of different ways I could make different objects with it. And with each iteration, my fiber kept getting smaller, and my compound of starch and fiber kept like changing as my fiber got smaller and smaller. At first I was doing like traditional paper mache and just had these big sheets, and then my sheets would get smaller, and I would keep getting smaller and smaller to the point where I was like blending up the paper bags I was using and mixing it with the starch-based binder and making almost like this clay material.
Okay.
And from there, it really took off. And eventually that led into the prompt, well, commercial grade compost furniture was like the first prompt I gave myself, and it just kind of took off from there.
That's awesome. I did see on your website as well, you were talking about a specific technique as well, sort of pounding the clay. Is that right?
Yeah, so it's not pounding the fiber. That's called a mate, and that is a Mesoamerican paper making technique, which was a turn that my work took while I was at school. I had met Daniel Heyman in the printmaking department at RISD, and he's a prolific paper maker, and he saw my work somehow, and he's like, so what are you doing? Please explain it to me. It looks fiber based. I was like, yeah, it is fiber based. This is what I'm doing. I'm making the clay, I'm molding it, and then letting it cure. And he, yeah, heard my process, and he's like, oh, you're making paper. I was like, no, I'm making furniture, and I'm making fiber clay to make the furniture.
Okay.
Like, no, you're making paper, because he's a paper maker. So he's
Okay.
telling me the parallels between what he's doing, what I'm doing. And by the time, like by the end of that first conversation, I was like, oh yeah, I am making paper.
Okay.
And he just opened up this whole world of like, yeah, these centuries old techniques of making paper. And essentially that's what I was doing. I was taking this 2D medium, this 2D technique, and creating 3D objects with it, which I'm not the first person to do that, but just doing it, a little differently.
Yeah.
And kind of cool not to be informed by that history, but to find myself aligned with it. And then meeting Daniel, it just like opened up this whole new world of opportunity and materials and techniques. And one of those techniques is amate, where, traditional, not, I shouldn't say traditional, but like the paper making that we're familiar with is very much an Eastern technique where you're making this fiber slurry and pulling it through on screens with decals. And this is usually, when you speak to paper makers, this is how we're educated as far as what handmade paper is. But there's this whole other technique that's been not in development, but it's been happening in parallel with Eastern techniques, and it's a Mesoamerican technique of taking the fibers, and instead of slurrying them, you take the raw fiber, you lay it out in a grid pattern, and you smash it into a paper shape. So myself and my collaborator Tony Torres, we went deep on that technique, and he's also paper maker, print maker, prolific artist, and we just found a lot of parallels in our Mesoamerican background, our Mexican heritage, and playing with this technique. And yeah, we created a few like really wild objects with it.
That is awesome. That's so cool. And if those of you who are watching, we'll give you the information on how to find Sam later, but you have to look at his stuff. Like, it's so cool. You can see in my stories, there's a few photos, but it's just, it's beautiful. And you can see the different, in the lamp, I feel like you can see the different pieces, the different pieces of your material or paper.
Yeah, there's like these two avenues of amate that I've gone down. One is Tony and I making our own amate paper and using that. And then another is using the amate that's made by the artisans who've been doing it for generations. And they're based out of the San Pablito region of Mexico. And this is the only place in Mexico where the practice of like developing amate on a commercial scale still happens today.
Okay.
So what you're referring to is my collage work with amate made by the people who really know how to make it. And it is this beautiful, almost like burl-like patterns in the material. It's really gorgeous. And
it is. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have a circular approach to sculptural or to crafting sculptural furniture. Can you explain to our listeners what is circular design and why is it important?
Yeah, there's like so many definitions. There's a spectrum of definitions on this one, which I think you and I spoke about before when we were first having our conversation. I think to me right now in this moment, circular design is taking into account where the materials are coming from, how we're processing them, how they're being used, and where they go at end of life. Just taking all those points in a product's life cycle or a material's life cycle and taking into consideration how each one of those moments affects the users, the people, the community around it, the economy around it, and the environment around it. So I think being circular is just being very aware of how these objects that we're making, that we're living with, are touching all the stakeholders, and the stakeholders being the economy, the community, and the environment.
So I think that we walk into a store, and marketing is there for this reason, but you walk into a store, you see something beautiful or the way it's displayed, and you're like, and you're like, oh, it's so beautiful, I have to have this, and you want to bring it home, and you look at the price and you're like, oh, what a great price. But we are not going in and thinking, oh, this looks nice, okay, what's it made of, oh, who made it, where was it made, and then yeah, like what happens to it when I'm done with it. Like we don't think of all of, I do, but we don't think of all of
I'm
these
so
things.
glad
I have a
that
very,
you do.
I
That's a
have a
huge
very
step
hard
in the
time
right
shopping.
direction.
I have a very hard time shopping. I can't buy anything new. I walk into a store and I find it very overwhelming because I'm like, everything's so beautiful, but I just, no, this is made of this or this is made of that. And um, and so I love that sort of and I feel like there are more and more sort of designers and makers out there who are trying to incorporate circularity in their designs, thinking of, the whole life cycle of the product and the whole sort of the use and the the end of life. Anyway, so I love that. And I part of what I'm trying to do is to just educate people so that they understand, there's like you said, even the community, like who made it,
Mm-hmm.
where does it come from, all of that is really important to consider when you're making a purchase. So yes, thank you for that.
Yeah.
So I read on your website about the disconnect that furniture is on average used for 5 to 10 years, but it's produced to exist for hundreds of years. So can you talk to us a little bit about that and explain sort of why that is and how we as consumers can make better choices when it comes to purchasing furniture?
Yeah. Why that is just a really big, convoluted question of industrialization over
The
the last,
Industrial Revolution. Thank
yeah,
you.
over the
Yes.
last whatever
Yes.
century. Um, yeah, so that disconnect very much exists. And it's not just in our furniture. I think it's in all our objects. Even I think like the grossest, I don't want to say gross because we all use them and we're all trying to do our best in this situation that we find ourselves in. So gross is definitely the wrong word. But just to talk about single-use plastics for a moment, it's in the name. Like we're just going to use it once, but it's not designed to be used once. It's designed with petrochemicals and it's designed to exist for 100 years, hundreds of years, thousands of years, depending on where you're pulling your research from. There's
So
just a
that I
huge
can eat my lunch.
disconnect in there's just a huge disconnect in what we're calling it and how it actually exists. And that same reality exists in our furniture too. Um, Most of us are not buying things to live with them and then hand them off to the next generation. Maybe we have one or two pieces. That's not, I think for a lot of people, you just can't afford to live that way. We can't afford to live that way. And it's also just not the mindset of how we're thinking about our objects. We get them because they look great and they're the right price point. And I'm not preaching here. Like I am the same way. We're all just doing our best. So I don't want to
Yes.
like guilt anybody for the decisions they're
Yes.
making. We're all doing our best. But yeah, the disconnect is real. We're using them for 5 to 10 years. We're getting rid of them, and then they're not going anywhere. They're still there. The resins in MDF, it is 99% fiber. It is 99% FSC certified fiber. But that resin that holds it together makes it a forever product. It's something that is not just going to go away. Yeah, it's something that's just not going to go away. So I think the conversation, the fact that we're having this conversation, the fact that there are designers that call themselves sustainable interior designers, like that's a huge step forward. Because I think education, it's such a big problem and it's too big for any one person or one organization to take on. But I think as designers, both product designers, furniture designers, interior designers, like I think our voice is a little louder than maybe the consumer. And if the demand starts here and the education starts here, then the consumers can start making demands as well. And eventually together we can hopefully set an expectation of, well, if you really want to make money, you have to adjust your practices as a business. And I think that's where real change happens. But it has to start somewhere,
Yes.
and conversation is where it starts.
Yeah, for
Mm.
sure. I agree. As a sustainable interior designer, I try and educate my clients, when I'm working on their projects. Some people come to me because they want the sustainable interior design and they're like, wow, this is awesome. And they want to know everything about all the products. And some people come to me, it's referrals from family and friends, and they're just looking for an interior designer. and I say sustainable interior design and I do my pitch, and then they think, oh, this is probably going to be expensive, or, you know, but essentially I'm trying to, you know, I try to explain to them how, you know, you can use what you already have. You can use what exists already. We can, you know, buy vintage furniture. We get, like, there's so many ways that you can even save by designing with sustainability in mind. A lot of it is about planning too, and not buying the wrong piece for your space, or not, you know, choosing the wrong material that won't last, or, you know. So I try and educate my clients as well along the way, and sometimes by the end I have them converted. So I'm pretty happy about that. At least if we can plant a seed, you know. So the point of this series is to chat with people like you and show people that there are better alternatives to, you know, the big box stores, or but like you said too, there is you know, we are all just doing our best with the information with the resources we have, but hopefully there will be, you know, this movement will grow, and we will have more and more sustainable options and solutions for people. So
yeah, like you said, it starts with a seed. It's a great place to start.
Yeah, exactly. So how can we find you, Sam?
So the best place is through Instagram.
Okay.
Any updates, anything's happening, any new images or objects that I have, it all filters through there. I try to stay in the studio as much as possible, and that means like limiting my avenues to audience. So I find Instagram just to be the best. Even on my website, if people want to contact me, I say, you know, slide into the DMs. That's way better, because on email it just gets lost. You know, there's so many unnecessary emails.
But yeah,
but
yeah, for sure.
DMs are cleaner than emails for sure. So yeah, Instagram would be the way to go.
Okay. So thank you so much for joining us. I will post this live for everybody to watch, and I will also add all of your information in the comments. So if you want to find Sam, you can find him. You can check out his absolutely beautiful products. And if you're in New York, Sam usually has a show. I don't know. There's tons of shows, I feel like, going on in New York all the time with featuring Sam's beautiful products. So you can go check him out.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Alex. This was great.
Thank you. Thanks for joining. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.